It's the pernicious purveyor of preposterous pomposity, the paragon of pugilistic punditry, the king of Connecticut, Matt Granahan, the suntan Superman. And I am here again at Berman Law Group with another episode of the TBT podcast, the Berman team. And man, do I have a special guest today. The word legend often gets thrown around carelessly, recklessly, but this man is a true legend. He started out as the most dominant high school wrestler in the United States, national champion. He was going out for the Olympic team by age 17. He went on to wrestle for Arizona State University, multiple time All-American. He went on to become an international wrestler representing the United States of America all over the world. He segued into a sport that was known at the time as no holds barred, but that they now call mixed martial arts. This man was the very first collegiate and international high-level wrestler in the Ultimate Fighting Championships. He's a super fight champion. He's an ultimate champion. He's a UFC Hall of Famer and pioneer. He's a National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Champion, WWE Superstar, Master Thespian, in such classic movies as Rudy, and the star of the iconic horror movies, Swamp Zombies. He's even starred in movies alongside of the Hedgehog, Ron Jeremy. Without further ado, my good friend, Dan the Beast Severn!
You really did get out that decaf there, man. But I was actually rather impressed with that little introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.
I was waiting for someone else to come inside the door there at first.
Well, Dan, you know, we've been up and down the road together for years. I've known you for a long time. We've done some world-class wrestling clinics. You came and joined me at my alma mater, Norwalk High School, to raise money for the mats, which I considered an honor to have you there. I was in the main event, of course. You were on the undercard.
Wrestling against
the cauliflower.
Yeah.
Busting the cauliflower over his head.
And he actually did have a set of good cauliflower ears.
Cauliflower ears, yes.
The cauliflower, so yeah.
Chase Brown was a stud wrestler out of Rock Hill, South Carolina, and wrestled for a small college up there, and got into jiu-jitsu. We can talk about the history of jiu-jitsu along with the MMA, but Chase Brown looked like a cartoon character. I mean, and he was a great guitarist and singer as well. Wrote his own song.
I know you and him had a little battle of the singletry there that night. I do believe.
That's right. I wrote the Ballad of Chase Brown and strummed a little guitar myself. But Dan, we're not here to talk about Chase Brown. We're here to talk about you. And you've done a lot of interviews, but we're going to cover some stuff here that folks probably never even heard about because we know each other so well. And I want to take the people back to the young Dan Severn, growing up on the farm in Michigan.
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about your upbringing.
Well, Matt, I actually have 7 other siblings. I am actually second on the totem pole. I have an older brother, but there's a total of 5 males and 3 females in the Severn sibling category. Growing up on a 120-acre farm, it was like living, like I think, a little bit of the life of a Tom Sawyer, because out of 120 acres, 80 of it was actually tillable, where actually planted crops. So you name the crops, we planted all. And the other remaining acreage would be creeks and woods. So building forts, building rope swings, fishing, hunting, you name it, we did it all on our property. I didn't know that you actually had to have a license to hunt on your own property until I think I hit junior high. That there was like a couple of my male friends were like saying, "Well, they got a shooting class coming up, and I'm gonna get I'll get my gun permit." I'm thinking, you actually have to get a permit to wield a gun, to shoot a gun. I'm like, and you actually have to take classes. I go, didn't your father take you out back and say, son, you aim this in at whatever you aim to hit and kill?
Yeah.
And don't aim it at anything otherwise.
Yeah. And I have to share that too, because my father just recently passed away, and my father was a great marksman. He was a trap shooting champion, my first wrestling coach, and he was a great man and taught me how to hunt as well as a youngster, as a young man. And it's a skill that a lot of young men today don't know. But let's talk.
Not only just not know, they've never done. They have
Exactly.
not wielded a gun. They haven't shot at targets. They haven't shot at game. And again, not to shoot at game simply to, again, that was one of the things my father also was told, was like, you don't shoot things just for sport.
No,
You shoot things that you're going to eat.
absolutely.
So even when I shot a couple of squirrels, them squirrels were cleaned and you ate them.
My mother used to make, my mother being a Italian Sicilian woman, she used to make squirrel cacciatore when we were youngsters.
Really?
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't think I've ever quite heard of that
Well,
delicacy, but I've
I'll explain that a little bit as a chef myself. Cacciatore in Italian means hunter. So anything that you kill, be it rabbit cacciatore, we had even pigeon cacciatore. They call cacciatore, and it's a recipe that you make with whichever kind of a game you harvest.
that you catched.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
I thought there was maybe a play off of that cacciatore that you catch.
Catch,
you know,
exactly.
yeah.
That's probably where the word catch came from the Latin and the Italiano, cacciatore. And Dan, you were at a good buddy of ours, Coach Matt Perkel's house. He's an avid hunter and has some livestock. You had the opportunity to stay at his house when we were doing some wrestling seminars at his old MMA school that he had.
Uh-huh.
And I remember he told me that he learned a lot from you staying there about animals, that because he had his own animals, he had his own little small farm there as well. So you're a very knowledgeable man in that
No,
regard.
okay, no, just again, growing up on a farm, you named the animal, we raised it. So cattle, again, both beef cattle, but then also had a couple dairy cows. One of my first job as a young man was simply to milk Peggy, the family milk cow.
Yeah.
But to actually have real milk, to have actually make butter, real butter from the cream that you would as the milk would settle, you would just strain it through a cheesecloth so that any kind of impurities would ever get into it. You strain it through the cheesecloth, and then you let the milk sit for a couple hours, and you'd be surprised. Out of say maybe a couple gallon bucket of milk, the top couple inches would be all nothing but solid cream. You
Yeah.
lay it on off. And my mother used to, again, having so many different siblings, she would go into different classrooms and she would make up a little mini loaf of bread for each of the children. And then she would go in there with the cream, and they would actually be taking turns of an old butter churn just simply just went up and down, and
Yep.
they would just and the kids would take turns churning the cream and actually turn it into butter, and then they would all have their own little piece of a loaf of bread, and they could try what real butter tasted
True
like.
butter. And a lot of people don't know too, milk, unpasteurized milk is clear. You know, the milk that we drink, the white milk, we don't realize. I had the opportunity when I was a teenager in the summer. There was a farm that we used to hunt on up in Argyle, New York, in upstate New York, because my dad had a place up there. And I had the opportunity to work on the dairy farm, and my dad made me do that. He said, I want you, because my dad grew up on a chicken farm. He said, I want you to work on the farm to
To
be. So a
understand
lot of
some of
city
the
folks don't know that.
yeah, well, understanding just the work ethic of the farmer because you going back to some of my childhood there growing up, you had to get up in the morning and take care of the animals,
Mhm.
do your chores before you got taken care of, and you have to do it within a certain timely manner because then you get fed, you get dressed, and then you have to walk up to catch the school bus. So there was again, a lot of people don't understand because of the convenience that people look for.
Sure.
They don't try to really go out of their way to do anything. It's and our whole aspect was no matter what time of the year was that we had to do things. If it was really bad weather, something like that, mom might pull out the station wagon to drive up, but that was quite the snaggle of kids to see all climbing on the school bus or try to climb in and out of the vehicles at different times. So
Yeah,
you learn to share, and you learned what hand me downs were, and so yeah,
definitely.
going
And
to the Goodwill or the Salvation Army to pick up something new that was going to be new for you.
and that's a great segue, Dan, because that farmer's lifestyle, when we think about it, so many great wrestlers. As a great segue into your wrestling career as a young man, came from the farm. Guys like Matt Hughes, Brock Lesnar, were both raised on farms. My good friend Pat Miletich, and you also had other guys out of PA. Think of the states that produce the best wrestlers.
Usually,
States like
a lot,
Pennsylvania,
lot of
farmer states,
yeah, a lot of
Iowa,
Midwesters. Yep.
Oklahoma. Yeah. So Dan, talk about how you had a lot of brothers and talk about how you got into wrestling. Briefly about your high school career.
Well, again, I'll say that my oldest brother Dave basically started the wrestling career for the Severn family. He jumped right into it right at seventh grade. I was playing a little bit of basketball in seventh grade at the time. Again, the influence of television and that, but I sort of sucked at playing basketball. It seemed like I could not actually dribble the ball, look away, and actually still have that ball underneath my hand. Um, so I tend to sit on the pine, as they call it, ride the
Ride the
bench.
pine. Yeah.
Yes, and so I had to be a couple of my friends that were on the wrestling team. There was a big flu epidemic that hit the school. A lot of students were out, and a couple of my friends from the wrestling team said, "Hey, Dad, would you come in and fill in a weight class tonight? Otherwise, we'll have to forfeit the weight class." Well, I'm thinking myself, I'm a strong, farm boy, something like this. I should be able to throw somebody around on this mat. And I ended up going out there wrestling twice and basically lost most of my matches. So I always told people I didn't set the world on fire. Kind of let my buddies down. Went back and finished up a little bit of my basketball career right there, and then went right out for the wrestling team. So I started my tutelage into the sport wrestling as of seventh grade.
And you had such a great career in high school that you started wrestling internationally. And talk about that, and talk about the records that you set.
Well, again, just to answer your question, but I need to set what started to set that's all that in motion was that the high school wrestling coach, Tom Castile, he's still alive. Tom Castile, he's getting up there in years. Um, he was also the government teacher, and I happened to have for class my freshman year. So early on in that year, I had to turn a paper into him. So as I'm walking up to his desk and I'm turning in my paper, I see this stack of amateur wrestling news magazines. I had never seen these before. I'm like, Coach, I go, do you care if I read a couple of these magazines? He said, no problem. He said, just as long as they bring it right back. So I start reading these amateur wrestling news, and that's when my mind was expanded there because up to that point, I was just like any other athlete or any other student. I simply just did whatever the teacher or I did whatever the coach said to do. And now, as I'm reading these magazines, I'm being enlightened to all these other types of wrestling techniques that are available that I've never seen before. It's talking about psychological aspects of the sport. It's talking about setting goals for yourself. It's talking about eating, nutrition, stretching programs, exercise programs. I mean, it just blew my mind. There was so much more to the sport than what I thought, and that's why I started setting some goals for myself. My first goal ever was to be the first freshman ever to make varsity at my high school alma mater. But then it was like, but then I was starting to follow the proper protocol of eating better, of exercising better, and helping design weightlifting programs and stuff like that for the sport of wrestling, and taking advantage of my physical education class. I have to use it like I like to say it term now because Matt, when you were probably still in high school or even junior high, the Presidential Physical Fitness Award, that badge, that meant something.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you were to walk into our high schools or junior highs today and see what they pawn off as physical education, oh, sad. And they wonder why United States is the fattest country in the world. Look at what we look what we start off, what we feed our people, and look at our lack of actually teaching young people as to what to do.
Well, Dan, didn't they get rid of gym class and phys ed class in a lot of schools, a lot of the high schools now? I think it was eliminated to a large degree.
I'm not certain about eliminated, but I simply know that I have a teaching degree from Arizona State.
Yeah.
And so I've done a lot of substitute teaching in a couple of different states, usually predominantly Arizona and Michigan, because that's the two states I bounced between that I lived for quite a long period of time. So I've done a lot of substitute between those two states. And I also would say that it still existed in both of those states,
Mm-hmm.
but what they pawn off as physical education, you're not going to break a sweat. I mean, I remember like the first time I went into the phys ed class, I mean, because each school you go into, you got to think about it. You've got a substitute teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that, okay, from the student's perspective, are they going to work today?
It's party time when the
Exactly.
Substitute comes in.
And especially the young bucks, they're looking to see what they're going to get away with.
Yeah.
That substitute teacher. So I remember like my very first time ever do a substitute teacher, I got into the classroom first, and I wrote up on the chalkboard just my name, Mr. Severn. And that's all I said right there. And I'm waiting for the bell ring. So students are filing on in. I see the young bucks that they're looking at each other, like high five and knuckle bump and stuff like this. Knowing that what's going to happen today? Nothing. They're just going to goof off.
That's what I say. It's party time when the
so,
substitutes thing.
But as soon as the bell rang, I stood up. I go, welcome, good morning, class. My name is Mr. Severn. If you have a hard time pronouncing Severn, you can call me Mr. S, or you can refer to me as Coach, because I've been a coach most of my life as well. If you want to know anything more about me, then I turn around to chalkboard and I wrote on it. You can look at my website at thebeast.com. Yeah. It's like going, and every high school has a computer lab. By second hour, they're in the computer. Who is this guy? By third hour, fourth hour, by lunchtime, it's all over the place. The guy, cage fighter this. He's a professional that. Amateur wrestler this. He's done this. He's done that. It's like going, and then by late in the day, the very first young man that had all the courage, he raises his hand, he goes, and I'm like, yes. He goes, well, Mr. Severn, he goes, you do know that you're not allowed to lay hands upon us, don't you? I go, au contraire. There will be repercussions if I should lay hands upon you. So rest assured, if I must lay hands upon you, then as a professional, I made the little crack of the knuckles, I'll make it worth my while.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
great. Again, it was like,
yeah.
Am I bluffing or not? Yeah. Do you want to call my bluff in the process? And they're all looking going, because I got fresh videos. I'm all over the internet of being this cage fighter, this UFC champion, that, and so it's like, but I always treated them well. It's not like I was just trying to be a bully or anything like that. No, but they also, when it came, they learned that I actually cared about their education. And there's very few teachers that really know how to teach. There's a lot of people in this world, all they're doing is they're going to sit there in that chair and they're going to take up space and time. And what are they really going to contribute? Zero.
Zero, absolutely.
So
A lot of people don't know that you were a teacher.
Yeah,
well, that's
but I'm still that
I knew
teacher.
that you were. Yeah, I knew that you were a teacher and obviously a coach. A wrestling coach with ASU and Michigan State. But a lot of people didn't know that you were a teacher. That's so interesting. Now, Dan, I want to kind of bleed into your collegiate wrestling career and cover that because.
Well, let's go back to you. I kind of went off into the teach stuff like that. So you asked me about high school, just growing up.
Yeah. Well, I was asking you about high school because I know you set some very impressive records in high school. Could you briefly explain that?
In a nutshell, I was a 3-time All-American, a 2-time high school state champion, as a national freestyle champion, national Greco-Roman champion. I won the Outstanding Wrestler Award on top of the National Pin Award. In the process of my 4 years, I set and held 8 national records simultaneously, which was a national record in itself because nobody had ever done it. I was a pinning machine. I just pinned people. To me, it's like, Matt, you've also been a wrestler. You simply know that as an amateur wrestler, if someone just beat you by a few points, you simply know in the back of your mind, like, I could get better because he only beat me by a couple of points. But when someone physically grabs you and against your will puts you on your back pins you, that's a whole different category right there. The pin is the ultimate victory, but it's also psychological because the next time you go out to face that person, there's a psychological edge that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a fast pinner, nowhere near the records you set, but I set a conference FCAC record, consecutive pin record.
But what was your move? What was your move that you hit?
Well, what we used to call, and everybody calls things different, but what we used to call the pancake. And I know a lot of people assign different names to it, but essentially a pancake can be caught from a couple different positions. When somebody shoots on you and you do like a half sprawl, grab the chin, and you switch your weight and drive them down.
Take like an underhook or a head or
underhook, okay. Chicken wing, and switch your weight, drive down, post your legs. Now, I know that they didn't know the term pancake in the South. They call that by a different name down there because there's so many different names. You can hit a pancake too from a snap down, but it's interesting to me because you were beating yourself basically because you were so good in high school that the goals that you were setting were to beat your own previous record and your own previous pin time for fast pins.
But no, that's why I would, even when I talk with young people nowadays, I go, never try to compare yourself to anybody else.
Yeah.
Only person that you got to compare yourself to is yourself. I've done it with my own sons in the sport of wrestling. I've talked to them about it with a couple of my daughters here about setting their own goals. I mean, even as young adults, setting your goals of what you want to get the best jobs you possibly could get. You want to try to attract the best, mate for yourself. I mean, you're looking for when people, I tell people, life is competition. Anyone that says elsewise might as well go to a communistic type country where you can all be equal.
Absolutely. And we'll touch on to politics a little bit too.
Do you see that little sinister?
Yeah.
You see a little sinister smile come across my face when I say that? Yes.
Absolutely. You had that tremendous pinning record in high school, and then you took it on.
But it carried over to college.
College. You took that on to college, and I didn't want to spend too because we want to get into your fight career that everybody knows about. But when you were in college, and you were a few years before me, and that was such a competitive heavyweight division, and anybody who knows wrestling will know this. I mean, you had Bruce Baumgartner, you had Lou Bannock, you had Steve Williams, that a lot of people know as Dr. Death, who was
professional wrestler,
star, professional wrestler, and great amateur wrestler too. But that was such a competitive heavyweight bracket, and you were in there before the weight cap.
Correct.
And I
that weight cap didn't come in until I think like the early to mid 80s.
I think it was mid 80s because we were talking about Daryl Peterson, who was also a national champion from Iowa that went into pro wrestling, and that guy's got to be like 400 pounds. So you had these
Chris
big
Taylor,
sumo looking.
Chris
Taylor,
from Iowa
monster.
State.
Yeah.
Former Iowa State. There you go.
Yeah, but these guys that weren't necessarily great athletes. And like, what's the least competitive, not competitive division, but like you said, easiest division is lightweight and heavyweight because there's less of them.
Yes, when you look at it, the two easiest weight classes would be the very lightest weight class or the very heaviest weight classes. The hardest one, if you're in the middle, if there's something around the 150-pound range, there are so many more people that are at that weight class at that time period. But as each year progresses on, you'll see people that they put a little bit more size, stuff like that. Because I mean, like when you were a freshman, you were a certain size of stature. By the time you're a senior, those 4 years, physical maturity, but then the way that you are seasoned, and that's what I was setting goals for myself for my freshman year just to make varsity. Did I have a winning season? No. I just wanted to see if I could make varsity. And I was able to achieve that. And then by the next year, raise the bar.
Absolutely.
Again, it was my bar for myself and just to continue to do that.
And to backtrack on something, because it just popped in my head, the word I was trying to look for that they call in the South, and I think the Midwest too, is cow catcher. They call that, they call it pancake, but we call it pancake.
Pancake, cow catcher. Yeah.
But in your, what I wanted to get to in your collegiate career, the swing of weight for heavyweight with not being a weight cap. I mean, you're a big guy, but I mean, you were at a serious weight deficit in a lot of those matches. And you were in the finals in the nationals.
But I wasn't really wrestling heavyweight by my collegiate career.
Yeah.
That was all at 190 pounds. In high school, my freshman year was only at my freshman year in high school was only at heavyweight. But then I ended up making the 185-pound weight class.
But when you were in college, you wrestled heavyweight, right?
I bounced between 190 and heavyweight.
Okay.
Yeah. Only really my senior year did I really go heavyweight, only due to an injury I had. Again, you don't talk about things because you don't want anyone to know about your injuries. So I had a bad neck injury, so I went heavyweight because heavyweights aren't known for being shooters. They're not known for doing this and that. Yeah. It's a lot of times it's referred to as the dance of the teddy bears.
Slow and lumbering, yeah.
Yes.
Slow, but you were in that bracket with some of the best heavyweights ever.
Bruce Baumgartner. You had a lot of heavyweights. Bruce Baumgartner, he had a very vicious double. Bruce was good about his double. Very agile, big man, yes.
What can you say about Dr. Death? Did you know Steve well?
I remember seeing him. It was almost like really, it was entertaining.
Yeah. Because he was a heel in college. Did he wear a mask?
There was a match where Arizona State was at Oklahoma University, and literally they're even announcing him as Dr. Death Steve Williams. Yeah. And when he goes out onto the mat, they're booing him. And it's a home match.
Fans. Yeah.
And he's blowing his fans kisses, So.
Yeah, he was an entertaining dude.
Yeah,
and he had some issue. It started with, I remember with his nose or something, nasal surgery he had. He started wearing a mask when he was in college. He had something on his face. I'll have to look it up, but he had some nasal surgery, and that was where he got the name Dr. Death. Looked like Hannibal Lecter or something. Yeah.
Wow. I learned something new today as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about, you wrestling in the finals of nationals against, was it Lober from Clemson?
No Loben. Yeah.
No Loben from Clemson. And that was a match you should have been awarded the victory.
Well, again, there's I think we've talked about this previously off the air, but I mean it's it's how people handle adversity, things that go wrong in life. So sometimes when whether you have control over it or whether other people you think they have control over what things they do or things that just simply go wrong. And I'll say that's what life is all about. It was, there's certain things that are burned or etched into my memory. And I can, even though that match happened, decades ago, I still can envision it all, how it went down at that point in time. To know that there's both Noah Loeb and I are scrambling around, we go out of bounds. And basically, referee brings it back in. I look over at the clock, 10 seconds are on the clock. I'm winning by 1 point. Only 10 seconds. It's in the bag. This is all win. All I can do is, both of us have been warned for stalling. Don't back up. Simply just move forward. When the referee blows the whistle to start the match, I move forward. I get a collar tie. I get an underhook. I got my opponent backing on up. In the final 2 seconds, a whistle's blown, and I'm called for stalling. There is no aspect whatsoever that I was stalling. I did everything. It was in a forward, aggressive type manner, and I get dinged for stalling. We have to go into overtime, and then I lose in overtime.
Yeah, the match you definitely should, but that's what drove you. As you
that
won,
was one of the first steps.
that started driving.
Everyone has
Yeah,
different things that happen in their life to where you can lay down, whimper, and let life beat you,
Yeah.
or it helps to motivate you to dig
Sure.
in and find out what you're made of.
Sure, definitely, and that gives you the fire to continue and the intensity. But what I wanted to get to is you had these amazing career, international wrestling and collegiate wrestling, but you went on to just compete for so many years. You have the most fights. You're in the top 3 of individuals that had the most fights of all time.
For like MMA, you mean?
For an MMA, but I'm
yeah.
just talking competition. You just kept going and going.
Yeah, well,
And-
again,
and
MMA. You gotta realize.
Yeah.
I mean, man, I didn't start until 37.
we're gonna
Who
get.
starts?
Yeah, I want to get to that because you went from college to compete internationally and make the Olympic team, and there was another contentious match you had. I think it was against Lou Bannock.
Yeah.
And that kept the
1984 Olympic
fire
team.
too. Yeah, explain that.
Well, again, just the Olympic trials. I would say that the 1984 Olympic trials was the very first time that USA Wrestling actually had the matches being videotaped, so that if there were to be any protests, it's like how football can go back and watch the monitors and stuff like that to see if there really was a true infraction or stuff like this. Was the same type of thing. Matches are being videotaped, so that if something should go wrong, and the athletes have now the athlete that was wrong has an opportunity to protest the match. And through the Olympic trials, I think there were I think there was an incredible. I think there was either 38 or 48 protests that were filed, and they actually gave out a paper onto it. I probably actually have that paper in the little file I have, because I wrote that story all on up. I kept it, so when it was fresh, and I still had the blood bleeding out of my heart.
Yeah.
Oh, I made sure I wrote it because I never want to forget that. These are certain days that I don't want to forget, because I always say if I need a little bit of motivation, I know right where to look at it. And so they have these matches that were supposed to be videotaped. I mean, they were. And if they found out that they were wrong, either the bout was supposed to be rescored, other man declared winner, or they were supposed to re-wrestle the match completely. I mean, they just had a couple alternatives that they came up, which made sense. And out of these, either 38 or 48 filed protests, all the others were done exactly that way, except mine. Mine was swept underneath the carpet.
And Gable was trying to stack that team with Iowa wrestlers.
Of course he was, because he was the Olympic coach, and he was also the head coach of Iowa University. And Iowa, again, to his kudos, Iowa had an incredible record going for a winning streak of the national title, stranglehold. When you look at the history of the sport of wrestling, the 2 Iowa schools, the 2 Oklahoma schools, but now it's
Penn
kind of
State.
moved back more to the eastern, to where you got Penn State has been really a very dominant force.
Well, Dan, the people who don't know amateur wrestling, but will know this, 1996, Kurt Angle won a gold medal. But what a lot of people don't know, one of my best friends and training partners. I managed him through his fight career. Kamal Shalarus, Prince of Persia, who was also great international wrestler and freestyle. And one of his mentors and his coach was Abbas Jabidi. In 1996 in Atlanta, the Iranians feel that Abbas definitely should have gotten the gold in the finals against Kurt Angle. So that's another one. So that was home court. You're in the United States, you're in Atlanta. The Iranians wanted they wanted to hang Kurt Angle by the. But think about it. If he had won the silver, would he have had that pro wrestling career that he had? It would have gone out to. So it's something that in any sport, especially individual sports, where there's points and there's scoring, you can have a little corruption there. But being a victim of that corruption is what drove you.
Well, again, you could either lay down and cry and let life beat you, or it inspires you to dig down deep. And I always tell people that when that happened, I mean, we wouldn't be talking here today.
Yeah.
Had everything gone right for me in 1984, I would have probably retired from the sport of amateur wrestling, and I would have been that teacher/coach at a local junior college, high school, and I would have been just content being that teacher and that wrestling coach. And
I would have never met you, probably.
Yeah. Well, again, that's where there would be no gold
be
in
the
front of you,
belts.
stuff like that. It never would have been a professional wrestling career. Would have never been a UFC career. So it's
Dan. Let's talk about this belt right here, and I want to have a discussion. The National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA Heavyweight Championship belt. Such a rich history of this belt. Mm-hmm. You were the champion here. And I was with Kevin Sullivan yesterday, who's a mutual friend of ours, all the wrestling fans who know Kevin. And we were talking Florida because we were in Daytona yesterday together doing a wrestling show and convention. And here in the state of Florida, where Eddie Graham's territory, there was Bob Roop, and there was Jack Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe. There was Hiro Matsuda.
Point blank, Florida is so rich in professional wrestling history. I think there was some type of a tax advantage for professional wrestlers, and there were several.
There was Bob Roop, and there was Jack Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe. There was Hiro Matsuda.
Point blank, Florida is so rich in professional wrestling history. I think there was some type of a tax advantage for professional.
Size you, and then they'd put you in the ring with a guy like one of us, and we would stretch
someone of real ability.
And we would stretch you and send you on your way. The Undertaker did a Joe Rogan show recently, and he talked about a guy that you probably don't even know you beat in the semifinals in high school nationals was a guy named Mad Dog Bud Sawyer, who was a great amateur wrestler, not at your level, but a really good amateur wrestler who stretched the hell out of The Undertaker when he wanted to get into pro wrestling. And he told that story on Rogan's show, and he said he was cross-facing him, busting up his face, and he says, this little stocky guy was just taking me down at will and stretching me. And The Undertaker, to his credit, he kept going, kept getting tough. Hulk Hogan, when he was Terry Bollea down here in Florida, wanted to get into the business of professional wrestling. Went to the Hiro Matsuda's gym. Hiro Matsuda broke his leg. Hogan came back, and Hogan said in his memoirs, he said they didn't even Spartan me up until after my first match. His first match was with a guy that we were with yesterday, who's a pretty good shooter too, from the Killer Bees. Help me out here. A friend of ours, but not Jim Brunzell, but Brian Blair. Brian Blair was against Brian Blair here in Florida, and Hogan writes about it in his book. They had him shoot with Brian Blair, and they kept him in the dark for so long, and they wouldn't smarten people up. And the history of this belt with guys like Lou Thez, even with
Lou
the
Thez,
woo Nature Boy Ric
yeah.
Flair, who also had a good amateur background as well, not at your level, but was a state champion and went on. I had scholarships in college and blew it all from partying, drinking, having a good time, and still being the Ric Flair like he is today. But he had scholarship for University of Minnesota. But the point is to get into the business. It was tough to get into the business of professional wrestling. Talk about what professional wrestling means to you and how you got into the business.
Well, I mean, I was approached by several independent companies through the mid '80s. So even when my collegiate career came to an end, and but there were still I couldn't be a pro. If I would have turned pro, I could not have made an Olympic team or a World Cup team. The rules were were still different. It wasn't until um, 1992, 1992 Olympic Games did the United States Olympic Committee allow professional athletes to compete still at the Olympic level. So that's when we had the dream team, basketball dream team that's out there. So now you got all these NBA stars that are out there, whereas before it was tough for the USA to win. Now you got all of our pros out there. It was like just a slam dunk in so many different ways that the United States ended up dominated in the sport of basketball. But it was like, 1992, I could have my cake and eat it too. I could be a professional wrestler, and I could be still trying to make Olympic teams, world teams, into the nature. Because again, the sport of wrestling has provided so much for me. It paid for my education. It was providing me with different types of livelihood, because I knew that I'll be a teacher, and I'm going to be this coach, and I'm going to have still an income coming from that. And I was still doing lots of amateur wrestling camps especially during the summer months. But then throughout the year, then at different time periods, there just were special easy times for me to go in and just do wrestling clinics. I was just good at watching people to see where they had weak spots. But
we're doing one tonight.
Yeah,
Wrestling clinic.
If you want to
at Unlimited Kickboxing in Merritt Island, Florida, right outside of Cocoa Beach.
Yeah. What I always tell people that I don't come in there with a canned seminar whatsoever. I like to ask them questions like as to where would you like to spend some time?
Yeah.
Where would you like to spend some time, knowing that a couple hour seminar is going to blow right past. Usually, people, when it comes to sport like amateur wrestling, you need to take people down, you need to put them on back and pin them.
Sure.
But then a lot of people can have all kinds of problems trying to get out from underneath. They can have all kinds of problems in different areas. So I always try to ask them, I'm like a specialist. Ask me some questions. Where do you want to go originally? Or a lot of times as I'm warming them up, or if I come in and I'm starting to warm up before this seminar ever starts, I'll see a couple guys or a couple gals that they'll be kind of just screwing around just a little bit, just to, hamming and egging, trying to do different types of moves to each other.
I'm just going to interject. You do tremendous. We've done several seminars over the years. You do tremendous seminars. But I want to get back to. I want to get through the wrestling and then the MMA, because we got another guest coming on. Talk about professional wrestling briefly. Your professional wrestling career, winning the NWA heavyweight title.
Well, this title belt. The NWA title belt was basically, I ended up winning it from Chris Candido.
Yeah, the late Chris Candido.
Yep. And you got to realize, and this was on Jim Cornette's, was the promoter.
Yeah.
Of this what was called Southern
Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Yeah.
And for Jim Cornette, never met me before. And I'm not certain who actually made the phone call to Jim Cornette. So it wasn't
Carol Luzo?
It was the belt
was on Smoky Mountain
It was
show.
on Smoky Mountain.
Okay.
But again, was it Dennis Carluzzo that spoke to Jim Cornette? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time that they decided to put the belt on me, there were, as far as I know, there was either 3 or 4 promoters left in the world that was pushing NWA. NWA was almost extinct.
Sure.
And so Jim Cornette agreed to it. Again, the man had never met me before, doesn't know who I am or not like this, but he allows it to happen.
Sure.
And I'll say then I ended up holding the belt for literally for just over 4 years, which again I think that rates up there in the top 10 all-time reigns of the NWA belt. But I ended up getting them so much exposure. I
Sure.
traveled all over the world defending the NWA belt, and it was seen at the Ultimate Fighting Championships. I'm the first guy
That brought
ever,
that belt way before
and
Brock.
still
Yeah.
and still the only one that has had a professional wrestling title belt carried out in their entourage. Dennis
Into the
Carluzzo
UFC. Yeah.
actually carried
Yeah.
that belt on out, the late
Yeah.
Dennis Carluzzo. And because I told him, I said, you guys, Dennis Carluzzo and the I think the four other gentlemen I had with me, they were all dressed up in Stars and Stripes uniforms,
Sure.
and they had they were going to be the entertainment. They actually had T-shirts, and they were whipping them out into the crowd, stuff like this. It was actually like a professional wrestling interest. And I go, you guys are the show, not me.
Yeah.
I go, my mind's going to be right because I'm going to go out there and I got to defeat 3 men here tonight. Because again, that was back during that no holds barred era where 8-man tournament. You have to win
Sure.
3 matches in 2 hours or less pay-per-view time. And
Sure.
so,
Well, yeah, let's jump into that because we know everybody knows you're in WWE. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but let's talk about your incredible UFC career and those early tournament style UFCs. Your very first one. Tell us about your experience in that very first UFC.
Well, the first UFC, I mean, basically all I was a last second fill-in. I had no time to really prepare. I mean, I always tell people that I trained for 5 days, an hour and a half a day. I drove from Coldwater, Michigan, over to Lima, Ohio, to work out
Al Snow.
Yeah. At the Body Slammers Gym.
Yeah.
So my training took place inside of a professional wrestling ring.
Yeah.
Whereas now, fast forward to today, in almost any community, no matter how big or small, you can either find a full cage or a section of a cage, and all of these different owners will say, "Oh yeah, we teach UFC techniques." I mean, most of these guys, they can't spell UFC, let alone even know how to conduct the proper types of techniques of training that needs to be implemented.
Yeah, you had such an amazing storied career and so many great opponents, and we're going to have to wrap this up soon. So I want to
stay tuned for part 2, maybe. What?
We'll have you down again, but you're actually going to be interviewed on another platform here with John Elite, and we have another guest. So we could talk, Dan. We could talk all day. We could talk all week. So many stories. We can get into politics as well. Everything that you want to discuss. But I want to just mention to people some of your great memorable fights against Oleg Tektarov. I always say this one looked like a prison rape against Forrest Griffin, where you had him held down the entire fight. Everybody knows UFC Hall of Famer Forrest Griffin.
I thought that was Tank Abbott.
Tank Abbott was brutal. You brutalized the tankster. Everybody knows that, so I don't want to cover that. What everybody knows, everybody knows your amazing career. And before we wrap this up, though, Dan, I want you to talk about your new podcast here with Don Fry.
Well, again, just to talk about it, just something that Don basically approached me on to, and he actually came up with the name Toxic Masculinity, and basically we just started moving forward with it. And I'll say that I've enjoyed having it, especially I think you kind of cover some of the things like there at the beginning.
I was a guest on your show recently.
We live in an era where people are not held accountable for what comes out of their mouth. There was, at a much younger age, if you said something that I disagreed with, I might say, "Let's step outside. I'm gonna pop you a Neil Keister there," and then we might pop each other a couple times, and then we move right back into the bar, and then we have a drink, and it's all done. But nowadays, everyone has this little cell phone. Everyone wants to stand around, videotape. But they're all
videotape everything.
Videotape cowards.
Yeah,
that's all they are. Yeah. Videotape cowards. Because why don't you simply step up there and stop this? Why let something carry on and go that's what that's why I dislike what's happened to our society more and more. We don't have enough men, real men,
Yeah.
stepping up to the plate, and you've got you know, he, she's, you know, those, that, these, thems, those, and again, I always tell people, do I really care? No, I don't care. Whatever floats your boat. That's one of the freedoms you have here in the United States.
Sure.
Freedom of speech. And I go, you name me one other country, you could actually have a full gay parade, and we're going to protect you.
Not in Iran, that's for sure.
Not
in Russia.
In the United States, we'll protect
Yeah.
you, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, that's what I say. That's one of the freedoms you have here in the United States. But you do that, and a few of these other foreign countries, you'll either end up in the gulag.
Dan, what I always say is, ever since the beginning, to keep the world spinning, it takes all kinds of characters. And Don Fry is a character, man. He's the last real cowboy, man. Great acting career like yourself. You've had a great acting career. Movies like Rudy, I joked with you about, and you were in a movie with Ron Jeremy and Dustin Diamond, that Tetherball.
Yeah, that was
you were up for an AVN award. Your shower scene with Jasmine St. Clair and Swamp Zombies, so saucy. So there's more to this man than just being a fighter and being a wrestler.
It's the dastardly stash right there.
Absolutely.
Man, the dastardly stash.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you guys, I want to thank you for tuning in. I wish I could spend hours with this man, but we have other guests.
At least let me put me out on the social media. Simply at least look at dansevern.com. I go on dansevern.com. My other types of social media pages for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Dan, I want to end this with a joke. And I don't know if you've seen this one, heard this one, and I want Evan to have our great producer, Evan Golden, to have the camera on me as I tell this joke. What's 230 pounds, dashingly handsome, and disappears in an instant? That cuts the show right there. That's the joke.
That's the joke. Gotcha.
Yes. So,
okay,
Dan, that was good, but I was getting, I hear them knocking on the door.